There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than thunder, when the delays, the detours, and even the rejections are not signs of denial, but divine redirection. You see, everything in this life, every encounter, every heartbreak, every still night when you felt unseen is part of a greater orchestration. A sacred rhythm that moves beneath what the eyes can see. A woman's heart, much like the spirit, is drawn not by force but by resonance, by the quiet strength of a man who walks in purpose, anchored not in charm but in character. The truth is, obsession is never born in performance, it's born in presence. When a man aligns with who he truly is, everything begins to shift, leaving you out in the cold. You don't chase gravity, it simply pulls. So tonight, we're not here to manipulate hearts, but to awaken souls, leaving you out in the cold, because we understand your place in the divine designed you. Stop chasing affection and start embodying attraction, leaving you out in the cold. Ooh, even the stars align for those who know their orbit. There comes a time in every man's life when he has to stop asking, what do I need to do to get her? And start asking, who was I created to become? Because the moment you start chasing after a woman more than you're chasing your assignment, you're no longer walking, wandering, leaving you out the cold. You were not born to orbit around her beauty. You were born to carry the weight of purpose, the fire of calling, the echo of heaven itself, and leaving you out the cold. And when you walk in that, when you stand in the center of your God-ordained path, she will not just notice you, she will feel the shift in the atmosphere when you enter the room. See, obsession isn't about attention. It's about alignment. A woman becomes deeply obsessed with the man who is obsessed with something greater than her. When she sees that you serve something higher, that your steps are ordered, leaving you out in the cold, that your confidence doesn't come from compliments, but from conviction, she begins to see you differently. She doesn't just see your frame. She sees your flame. And the truth is, fire doesn't beg to be noticed. Fire just burns and everything around it responds. When David stepped onto the battlefield, leaving you out in the cold, he wasn't thinking about impressing anybody. He wasn't chasing applause. He wasn't performing. He was positioned. And that positioning, born out of obedience and preparation, because kings to take notice and kingdoms to shift. That's what it looks like when a man walks in purpose, leaving you out in the cold. He doesn't have to beg to be seen. Purpose has its own spotlight. Some of you have been frustrated. You've been overlooked, undervalued, misunderstood, leaving you out in the cold. And you think it's because you're not saying the right words, not wearing the right clothes, not posting the right captions. But let me speak into your spiriting, leaving you out in attraction. It's not that you've lack attraction. It's that you've lost direction. You've made her the mission when she was only supposed to be part of the reward. She's not the calling, you are. Do you know what's irresistible to a woman who's been praying for a real man? A man who knows why he wakes up in the morning. A man who doesn't flinch when storms rise. A man who doesn't crumble when she pulls away because he's too rooted in his identity to be shaken by temporary distance. That kind of man doesn't chase her down, he calls her up. He speaks to her potential, not her performance. He leads not with ego, but with vision, leaving you out in the cold. And that is the kind of man she cannot shake from her soul. Let me tell you this, when you start walking in your divine assignment, everything begins to align. Leaving you out in the cold, you stop forcing conversations that were never meant to be. You stop compromising your values to get her attention. Leaving you out in the cold, you stop pretending to be something you're not just to feel accepted, because the man who walks in divine clarity doesn't compete. He commands. There is something supernatural that happens when you step into your ordained lane. Heaven starts to back you, doors open that no man can shut. The right woman will be drawn, leaving you out in the cold, not your potential, but to your posture. She will become obsessed not because you seduced her emotions, but because you awakened her spirit. Leaving you out in the cold, you reminded her of something she forgot she needed. You stood in the center of your calling and said, this is who I am, and this is where I'm going. You're welcome to join me, but I will not slow down to chase. That's the power of purpose. That's the power of divine masculinity. Leaving you in the cold, it doesn't shout, it doesn't chase, it doesn't manipulate, it moves, and everything around it adjusts. So I ask you today, where is your assignment? Leaving you out in the cold. What mountain are you meant to climb? What battle are you meant to fight? Because the moment you return to that place, if the moment you silence the distractions, shucking you out in the cold, down the ego, and fall back into alignment, the woman you were meant to lead will see it, not just with her eyes, but with her spirit. And when she does, she won't just want you, she'll need you. Because your presence will no longer be a choice. It will feel like destiny whispering her name through the sound of your footsteps in the cold. You were never meant to chase her. You were meant to become the man that purpose sent ahead of her. There is a stillness that speaks louder than words, and a calmness that carries more weight than any performance. And if you listen closely, you can hear it, not in the noise of popularity, not in the echoes of ego, but in the quiet places where character is carved and strength is born. Because in a world that moves at the speed of impulse, there's something deeply rare, almost divine, about a man who is not swayed by emotion, not shaken by rejection, not rushed by desire. He is not passive, but peaceful. He is not void of feeling, but anchored in truth. And that kind of presence, that kind of grounded energy, it doesn't just attract attention, it commands reverence. You see, most men try to gain affection by chasing, leaving you out in the cold. They pursue with panic. They text with trembling hands. They call, not because they're moved by purpose, but because they're afraid of being forgotten. But fear is a poor foundation for connection and obsession. True soul, deep obsession is never born in fear. It is born in emotional stillness. Let me speak into your spirit right now. Peace is not weakness. It is warfare. It is choosing to remain rooted while the world around you spins. It is the power to say, even if she doesn't text back, I will not lose my center. It is the strength to understand that her distance is not always rejection. It might be a divine delay. And you're out in the cold, and when you can be still in that moment, when you don't act out of insecurity, but stand in quiet assurance, that's when she begins to see you differently, leaving you out in the cold, because any man can react. But a king responds with wisdom, with patience, with presence. There's a reason Jesus slept in the storm, because the peace within him was greater than the chaos around him, leaving you out in the cold. And there's a reason a woman will find herself thinking about a man who never begged for her attention, because something in her spirit remembers what peace feels like. Not leaving you, not pressure, not pretense, but peace. The kind of peace that reminds her of home, of heaven, of something sacred, leaving you out in the cold. Have you ever wondered why the most unforgettable men are often the ones who say the least, yet leave the greatest impression? It's because silence wrapped in confidence becomes a language of its own. You out in the cold, the man who can sit in a moment and not rush it, the man can feel the tension and not try to fix it, the man who present without performing becomes a mystery that calls her deeper. Not because he's hiding, but because he's holding ground, holding truth, holding himself. And that, my brother, is the secret. Not in chasing her affection, but in cultivating your atmosphere. A woman may be drawn to your looks, impressed by your words, leaving you out the cold, entertained by your ambition, but she will only become obsessed with the space she feels in your presence. And if your spirit is cluttered, anxious, and unstable, she will retreat, not always because she wants to, but because her soul cannot breathe where there is no peace. This is why emotional stillness matters, because in that stillness, God speaks. In that stillness, you learn to hear, not just her needs, but his instruction. And when you begin to move from divine discernment rather than desperate desire, you don't just gain her attention, you become her answer. So breathe. Settle. Leaving you out in the cold. Remember who you are. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to perform miracles to be seen. You don't need to create a moment to be memorable. You just need to become the stillness that awakens her storm. Because when a woman encounters a man who can hold space without trying to control it, who can offer silence without insecurity, who can wait without fear, she will feel safe. And safety, my friend, is what every heart longs for, every soul remembers. It's what obsession is built upon, not lust, not noise, leaving out in the cold, but the holy quiet of emotional mastery. Let them chase chaos. Let them confuse noise for intimacy. But you stand still, you carry peace like a mantle, leaving you out in the cold, and watch how she returns, not just intrigued, but unable to forget the man whose presence felt like a sacred pause in the middle of life's storm. Leaving you out in, because the one who learns to master his stillness becomes the one every heart silently searches for. There's a sacred tension that exists in every relationship, a divine balance between connection and individuality. And too many men lose themselves in the very pursuit that was meant to reveal them. In the name of love, they forget who they are. They shrink to fit in. Leaving cold, they adapt to be chosen. They reflect her dreams while neglecting their own. And in doing so, they wonder why she loses interest, why the fire fades, leaving you out in the cold, why the very thing they wanted begins to slip through their fingers. But hear me now, you were never meant to disappear in order to be loved. Leaving you were meant to stand firm and let love find you fully formed. A woman does not become deeply obsessed with a shadow. She becomes obsessed with a mirror that reflects the best of her, without losing the image of you. This isn't about compromise. This is about clarity, leaving you out in the cold. When a man begins to himself just to be accepted, when he mirrors every mood, agrees with every word, and bends in every direction she leans, she may enjoy the ease for a moment, but her spirit will begin to ache for something solid, something certain, something real. You are not a placeholder for her fantasy. You are a revelation of something eternal. And if God took his time to form your being with intention, to pour his breath into your lungs, to assign a purpose to your name, how dare you forsake all of that just to be what you think she wants? Love is not found in imitation. It is found in integration. When you can see her, honor her, celebrate out in the cold, celebrate her beauty, her mind, her spirit, but never at the cost of your own identity. That is when something holy begins to form between you in the cold. Because let me tell you something few will. She's not looking for agreement. She's looking for authenticity. Deep down, she doesn't want you to echo her voice, leaving you out in the cold, you to carry your own. She wants to feel the gravity of your truth, even if it's different from hers. That's how trust is built. That's how intimacy is born. Leaving you, not through sameness, but through presence, through the unwavering reality of a man who knows himself and therefore can fully see her. The problem is that many of us were never taught how to stay rooted when love arrives. We were taught how to pursue, how to impress, how to seduce, but not how to stand. And so when a powerful woman enters the picture, when someone with depth and vision shows up, we shrink, not because we lack value, because we lack clarity, leaving out in the cold. And clarity only comes when you know who you are outside of who you're trying to love. This is where the divine enters. Because when you begin to see yourself, not just as a man, but as a vessel, when you understand that your personality, your voice, your calling is part of a sacred design, you stop trying to be enough for her and you start being obedient to him. And from that place, your presence carries weight. Leaving you out in the cold, your words have authority. Energy becomes undeniable because now you're not just reacting to her, you're revealing her. You're awakening things in her, not by copying her, by confronting her spirit with your truth. And oh, leaving you out, and that happens. When then a woman feels your essence without you losing your edge, she won't just be interested, she'll be captivated. She'll lean in, leaving you out in the cold, not because you're playing a role, because your soul is undeniable. She'll see you, and in seeing you, she'll see parts of herself that have been waiting to rise, leaving you out in the cold. But make no mistaking, this kind of presence requires courage. It requires restraint. It was the humility to be honest, the strength to disagree with love, leaving you out in the cold, the boldness to lead with conviction. It means knowing when to stand firm, even when it might make her uncomfortable, because you are not there to pacify her fears, leaving you out in the cold. You are there to anchor her potential. And the man who can reflect a woman's depth without losing himself in her shadows, that man becomes unforgettable, leaving you out in the cold, because a woman may love many things about a man, but she will only become obsessed with the one who reminds her who she is without ever forgetting who he is. There is a difference, an eternal, holy difference between mystery and manipulation. And in this world, where love is often reduced to strategy, leaving you out in the cold, where attraction is twisted into a game of who can hide better, it is easy to forget that divine love was never meant to be played. It was meant to be revealed, but not all at once, not in a rush, not in a flood of information that leaves nothing for the soul to discover. True connection unfolds like scripture, line upon line, precept upon precept. It is sacred, not secretive. It invites curiosity without provoking confusion. It draws in with depth, not with deception. See, and a man who is truly walking with God understands that mystery is not about withholding. It's about honoring. It's about knowing that your spirit is not casual. Your mind, leaving you out in the cold, your heart, your vision, they are not toys to be thrown around in hopes of being picked up. They are treasures, and the greatest treasures are never found on the surface. They are buried in intention. They are protected by patience, and they are uncovered only by the hands that are willing to seek with reverence, not with entitlement, leaving you out in the cold. This is why so many relationships break before they ever begin, because one or both people rush into exposure before they've earned access. Leaving you in the cold, lead with image instead of identity. They give away stories meant for covenant while still living in curiosity. And then they wonder why what started with fire ends in silence. But the truth is, what begins in performance can never survive in presence. An obsession true, soul deep, leaning out in the cold, cannot stop thinking about you. Obsession is not born from what you give away too soon. It's born from what you carry with discipline, with discernment, leaving you out in the cold, and with divine timing. God didn't create you to be an open book to everyone. Even Jesus spoke in parables, not because he was hiding truth, but because he understood the value of pursuit. He knew that those who were truly hungry would ask, would press in, would seek beyond the surface. And so must you. Your story isn't for every ear. Your vulnerability isn't for every moment. Your soul isn't for every hand. When you learn to build sacred mystery, not walls, leaving out in the cold, but depth, you don't repel the right woman, you invite her into the unfolding, into the becoming. into something that feels less like dating and more like discovering destiny. But I want to speak plainly to the men who've confused this mystery with manipulation. There is no blessing in pretending to be something you are not. There is no favor in masking your intentions to provoke her reaction. If your silence is rooted in fear, if your distance is designed to provoke her insecurity, you are not walking in the spirit, you are walking in ego. And ego never leads to covenant. It may win her attention, leaving you out in the cold, but it will never win her heart because the heart does not respond to tactics. It responds to truth. So what does this mystery look like in the divine sense? Leaving you out in the cold. It looks like a man who reveals himself slowly, not because he's unsure, but because he's intentional. It's the man who speaks when it matters, who listens deeply, who doesn't rush to expose every detail of his life in the first encounter, but allows her spirit to meet his layer by layer, chapter by chapter, leaving you out in the colding. It's waiting. It's not teasing. It's timing. It's letting the story your soul will be told like a sacred novel, not a cheap headline. And when a woman feels that, when she senses that you are not hiding, but guarding, when she realizes that your mystery isn't emptiness in disguise, leaving you out in the cold, but a fullness wrapped in reverence, she won't just be curious. She'll be compelled. She'll lean in, not because she's confused, leaving you out because she feels something eternal unfolding. And that kind of movement, that kind of spiritual gravity doesn't fade. It deepens. Leaving you out in the cold, there is a holiness in your journey. There is a rhythm in your revelation. And the right woman will not need to be manipulated to see your worth. Leaving you out in the cold, she will sense the divine pulse in your restraint. She will recognize that the very things you guard are the things that prove you are worthy of trust. So let the others play games. Let them chase attention with noise and novelty. But you become a man who builds sacred mystery. One step, one moment, one truth at a time. Leaving you out in the cold because the one who reveals himself slowly, with purpose, with presence, with peace, becomes the man whose depth she cannot stop diving into, leaving you out in the cold. There is a difference between being desired and being divinely recognized, a difference between the man who captures a woman's attention for a moment and the man who carries her spirit into alignment with her future. Too many men are chasing attraction, trying to become what pleases the eye, never realizing that the soul cannot be fooled by surface. You were not created to be a distraction to her flesh. You were designed to become an echo of her prayers, because deep within every woman, underneath the questions, the longings, the silent hopes, there is a voice that prays in the quiet, leaving you out in the cold, asking for a love that doesn't just touch her body, but covers her soul. And while the world tells you to become louder, more visible, leaving you the cold, more desirable heaven is asking you to become still, wholly refined, to be shaped in the silence so you can become the answer to what she hasn't even told anyone she needs. You see, a woman can be impressed by 1,000 things. Your confidence, your charm, your strength. But none of that will keep her spirit rooted if your presence doesn't bring peace. And peace, true divine peace, isn't found in smooth talk or grand gestures. It's found in still waters. It's felt in the quiet certainty of a man who walks with God, leaving you old, who doesn't flinch under pressure, who knows where he's going and doesn't beg her to follow. He simply walks in purpose and lets the steps speak louder than words. In the cold. Because when a woman prays, she's not just asking for someone to love her well. She's asking for someone who knows how to lead himself. A man who's not ruled by impulse, leaving you out in the cold, not governed by ego. A man who listens before he speaks, who builds before he boasts, who stands when others fall, leaving out in the cold because he is not living to impress. He is living to fulfill. And here's the truth: when you become that man, you won't have to convince her. You won't have to play games or perform spiritual theatrics. Her spirit will know. Something in her will respond, not just emotionally, but prophetically, because her soul will recognize that you are not just another man trying to touch her life. You are the confirmation that heaven heard her. But let me warn you, this cannot be faked. You cannot manufacture peace. You cannot pretend to be whole while living fractured in secret. If you are not healed, if she will feel it, if you are still ruled by lust, she will sense it. If your purpose is blurry, your leadership will falter, leaving you out the cold. And no matter how much you try to say the right thing, a spirit out of alignment cannot create lasting covenant. So what do? You go back to the silence, leaving you out the cold, to the wilderness where God refines men. You go back to the altar where ego dies and identity is born. You let the fire of discipline burn off every false layer until only the essence remains. And from that place up you emerge not as a man chasing affirmation, but as a man who carries assignment. Because when your life becomes the answer to a prayer, your presence becomes unforgettable. leaving out in the cold. You'll find that you're not drawing women in with effort, but with energy, with peace, with the weight of heaven resting on your shoulders. Leaving out the cold, the kind of weight that makes a woman pause in your presence and think, I don't know what it is about him, but I feel safe. I feel seen having you out in the cold. I feel covered. That's not charm. That's not swagger. That's anointing. That's the evidence of alignment. That's what happens when a man stops asking, how can I get her to want me? And starts asking, how can I become what she's been praying for? And the truth is, you don't become that overnight. You become it in prayer, in sacrifice, solitude, in choosing integrity when no one's watching, in turning down the temporary in pursuit of the eternal, leaving you out in the cold. You become it by becoming his before you try to become hers. So don't be the distraction that detours her destiny. Don't settle for being a good time when you were born to be a God-sent sign. Let your life be so aligned with the spirit that when she steps into your presence, leaving you out in the cold, she doesn't just feel chemistry, she hears confirmation. Because the man who walks in divine alignment doesn't attract attention, he awakens destiny.